Hello everyone. Today's lesson is going to be about dividing with decimals. I'm not going to get through everything today, so let's consider this a part one. We're going to focus on dividing whole numbers by whole numbers and then dividing a decimal by a whole number. Let's get started. As a little bit of a review, as we always like to kind of start that way, when we are solving a division problem, we have a little bit of vocab that goes with that. So typically we like to see division initially written this way. Sometimes we solve it using long division, but the first number is always the dividend, then we divide by the divisor, and then our answer is the quotient. When we put this into long division form, it's going to look kind of like this. So I always kind of jokingly say that the first one to the door gets inside, and then what do you do to your brother, your sister? Well, you're going to hold that door shut. You're going to lock him out as a little bit of a joke. So the divisor, who was second, okay, always ends up on the outside, and then our quotient or our answer is going to end up at the top. So just repeating that, the first number, meaning kind of left to right, the way we read a book, always gets inside. The second number is always on the outside, and our answer is called the quotient. A big important thing about this is always the first number, not the big number. That's a misconception we have sometimes, and it always goes by order, not by which one is bigger. So let's go ahead and take a look at our first problem. So we are going to solve the problem 12 divided by 10. So if I was solving this problem, I would start by just putting it into kind of long division form. And reminder, we're working with decimals here. So we've done problems like this, and we've written our answers with remainders, we've written our answers with fractions, and now we're going to focus on writing our answers with decimals. So to start, I know that 10 cannot go into 1, so we're going to put it in there 0 times. And then 10 can go into 12 1 time, so I'm going to subtract the 10. I would get 2. So this is often where we would write our answer like 1 remainder 2, or 1 and 2/10 or 1 and 1/5 if we simplified. But since we want to work with decimals, we're going to keep going. So anytime you have what we might think of as a remainder, when we work with decimals, what we're actually going to do is we're going to add a decimal and a 0. So if your number was originally a whole number as it was, if you didn't have a decimal, you're going to add in a decimal point and a 0. And why can we do this? Well, that's because 12 is the same as 12 and 0/10. Okay? Anytime we add decimals after the 0, it does not change the value of our number. And now what we can do is I can actually bring this 0 down, and now I have, okay, can 10 go into 20? Oh yeah, it goes in 2 times. So I would subtract it off. I would have 0. Now, we have to be careful because you might make the mistake of like, okay, my answer is 12. Well, does 10 go into 12 times? Does that make sense? No. So when we put this decimal inside of our house, we actually need to move it up. We raise it to the roof is what I like to say. Okay, so anytime you add that decimal in, or if you have a decimal on the inside, you're going to raise it up to the roof. So we would say that 12 divided by 10 equals 1 and 2/10. Okay, so that's how we divide decimals. Okay, so let's take a look at another problem. Okay, this problem is 36 divided by 8. I would like you to try this problem. Solve this one. Write it down. Which one goes into the house? Which one will be outside the house? Remember when we talked about that? And then I just give it a try. So try it now. Let's see what you get. So when I start this problem, I would start it by putting 36 in the house because it is the first number. Okay, 36 is our dividend and 8 is our divisor. So they go out here. Okay, and then we'd start. I know 8 goes into 3 0 times. So I could subtract the 0 off. You don't have to do that. You just might. 8 goes into 36 4 times. Okay, so if I brought that 6 down, okay, I would subtract 8 times 4 is 32. It gives me a 4. And then this is where we're going to add our decimal, because we still have a remainder down here. We ran out of numbers, but we still have 4. When dividing with decimals, we add that decimal in a 0. I'm also going to add the decimal straight up above. I'm going to bring my 0 down. 8 goes into 40 5 times. Now I've gotten down to that remainder of 0, which is what I wanted. 36 divided by 8 equals 4 and 5/10. How did you do? Did you get that one? Okay, let's see, what do we have for our next example? Ooh, we went smaller numbers this time. Not always necessarily does that mean it's easier. Okay, pause this video now. Give it a try. So if I was solving this, okay, 3 goes inside, 8 goes outside, which might be confusing to some of you because we've always kind of thought, hey, the big number inside. But in this case, the first number gets inside, the second number gets outside. So right off the bat, 8 cannot go into 3, so I would put a 0 up top. You could subtract that 0 off if you wanted to. This is where, because I have no more digits, I'm going to add a decimal in my 0 so I can get that second digit in there, that next 0. I'm also going to add that decimal up above right away. Okay, and then now 8 goes into 30 3 times. I would subtract off 24. That gives me a 6. Okay, and again, I still have this remainder here. We want to keep going until either we have no remainder, or we have kind of a repeating decimal, or if we're like, man, this is going to go on forever, then we can stop. But in this case, I can add another 0. I can add as many zeros as I want after that decimal point. I'm going to bring that 0 down. This 8 goes into 60 7 times, because that would be 56. That gives me 4. I'm going to add another 0. You just keep adding zeros and bringing them down again until either we get a remainder of 0, until we have a obviously repeating answer, or if it's like this is going to keep going and keep going, then we can stop. Okay, 8 goes into 40 5 times, which is exactly 40. So I did finally get to that final remainder of 0, and then here's my decimal answer up at the top. 3 divided by 8 equals 375 thousandths. Okay, now we're going to explore a different type of problem. So for this next one, notice that we don't have two whole numbers. We have a decimal first divided by a whole number. So this setup is the same. The first number will always go inside of that house. The second number always goes outside. Okay, the difference here is we are starting with a decimal point, and the very first thing you need to do when you start with a decimal point, when it's inside, when you have a whole number outside and a decimal inside, you need to move that decimal straight up. Now, in the future, we're going to talk about when you have a decimal on the outside, but we're not there yet. Today is just dividing a decimal by a whole number, or a whole number by a whole number. So I've moved that decimal up, and I'm going to divide like normal. 9 cannot go into 3. But 9 goes into 30 3 times. I would subtract off 27 because that's what 9 times 3 is. That gives me a 3. I still have this 6 here to bring down. 9 goes into 36 4 times. I have that remainder of 0. I'm all out of digits, and I have a 0 at the bottom, which is exactly what we want. Because we moved that decimal up right away, it helped everything kind of stay in order right here. So we can say that our final answer, 30 6/10 divided by 9, is 3 4/10. Okay, so hopefully you followed along with that. Okay, just as a reminder, we had a decimal number divided by a whole number. When that's the case, okay, the first number goes inside, the second number goes outside. Okay, we can move that decimal straight up because there's a decimal in the house, there wasn't one outside. Okay, let's take a look at the next problem and see if you can solve it. Ooh, Okay, here's a good one. So, pause this video now. I would like you to solve it. I will help you out. Okay, you probably know this by now, but if we take that first number, put it in the house, divide it by the second number. Okay, don't forget, feel free to use your multiplication chart if that would help you solve, but pause this video and solve now. The very first thing I would do is move that decimal up. Since it's a decimal on the inside, okay, but not on the outside, you raise it to the roof. Okay, raise that decimal up. And then from there we solve. 12 cannot go into 2, or it goes into 2 0 times, but 12 goes into 27 2 times, so I can subtract that 24. That would give me a 3. I'm going to bring down the 7. 12 goes into 37 3 times, because I know that would make 36. I got a 1. I'm going to bring down this next digit, because we still have it. 12 goes into 12 1 time. I got to 0. I've used all of my digits up here. So my final answer is simply 2 31/100ths. All right, and time for our very last problem. So go ahead and solve this problem, and let's see if you know how to divide decimals. Pause the video now. Go ahead and solve. To start this problem, we would put 42 28/100ths inside the house. We put 7 outside. Since we have a whole number on the outside, a decimal on the inside, we're going to move that decimal straight on up. And then we just divide like normal. 7 goes into 4 0 times. 7 goes into 42 6 times. And I'm going to subtract off. 7 times 2 makes 42. I would bring down the 2, okay, and this is maybe where you made a mistake. We'll see. 7 goes into 2 0 times. It can't go into it, so we would just basically subtract off 0, okay? So that's an important one that students sometimes forget. You check, did you include that 0 or not? Then I bring down my 8, and 7 goes into 28. 4 times. My final answer is 6, and make sure you can see my decimal, 4/100ths. Hopefully you've learned something about dividing decimals today. If you have further questions, please let me know.